Tonight, how they tried to tell the world they were alive. Now that the miners are out, so are their incredible stories. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, one of the closest and hottest races in the country. The Senate Majority Leader under fire.
Man up, Harry Reid.
Superbugs, a growing health crisis.
It is starting to move out of the hospitals and into the communities.
And her brother's keeper, how far she went to find the truth that set him free.
From CBS News World Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. After 10 weeks trapped in a cave-in and 2 nights in the hospital, most of Chile's rescued miners will finally sleep in their own beds tonight. 31 of the 33 reportedly were sent home today. For 70 days, we could only imagine the horror they went through. Now they're telling their families exactly what went on inside that mine. For the first 17 days, they had no idea whether they'd ever get out or if they'd slowly starve to death. Seth Doan reports tonight from Copiapó, Chile.
As the miners begin returning home, hidden details of their underground ordeal are surfacing.
One of the guys said, if we gave ourselves up to death, we were afraid that the first one who died would be eaten.
Writer Jonathan Franklin spoke to the miners and their families throughout the crisis. Following the collapse, the miners split into 2 groups. One remained in the safety zone. The other group attempted to climb out through air shafts. Tires were burned in hopes the dark smoke would find its way to the surface. The miners even set off explosives, hoping to alert rescuers, but there was no response.
The shaft, the one area that might have been able to climb out, caved in and they were sealed in.
As the days dragged on, emotions ran high. Some pushing and shoving broke out, but eventually a sense of community grew.
So they actually voted on issues. They had daily meetings and they had daily prayers. I asked another miner, how did you do it? And he said, we survived on religion and humor.
It was 17 days before they learned they hadn't been forgotten. But rescue brought other complications for miner Johnny Barrios.
And at one point, the miners joked, Johnny doesn't want to be rescued. He'll stay down here.
This is a homecoming that has interested people around the world, because when miner Johnny Barrios comes home, he'll be coming here to his mistress's house, not his wife's house, just down the street.
Nobody knows the word love anymore.
It was Susana Valenzuela who greeted Barrios as he emerged, and she's preparing his welcome home party.
He's all mine, meat and bones.
He may be hers, but he still has his own secrets about his ordeal.
When you ask him about it, he tears up a little and says, no, my love, later.
The last miners should be out of the hospital behind me by the end of the weekend. On Sunday, they're all expected to return to the mine for a special mass. Katie?
And Seth, I know a flood of interview requests and endorsement offers have come their way. How are they all handling that?
Well, it remains to be seen, really. Deep underground, they knew that people were fascinated by their story, and they figured that they could make money in sharing it. So it turns out they decided to sign a special pact in which all 33 people would share in any profits they made. So we'll see if indeed that is what happens. Katie?
All right, Seth Doan reporting tonight from Copiapó, Chile. Seth, thank you so much for your reporting all week long. You've done a terrific job.
Thanks, Katie.
And here at home, a man at the center of the housing meltdown agreed today to pay a record fine to avoid a civil trial for fraud and insider trading. Angelo Mazzillo, co-founder of Countrywide Financial, will pay $22.5 million in penalties. Plus, he'll repay $45 million in profits he made. All the money will go to investors Mazzillo is accused of misleading about the quality of loans Countrywide had on its books. Anthony Mason has more.
As founder and CEO of Countrywide Financial, the company that came to symbolize the subprime meltdown, Angelo Mazzillo pocketed more than $400 million.
In short, as our company did well, I did well.
But when Time magazine named 25 people to blame for the financial crisis, Mazzillo topped the list.
You run the largest originator of home mortgages in the country. If you don't bear personal responsibility, I don't know who does.
The son of a Bronx butcher, Mazzillo grew Countrywide into the largest mortgage lender, in part by expanding into risky subprime loans. But in 2007, he quietly sold off $140 million in company stock before investors were aware Countrywide was buckling under the weight of those bad loans. To settle charges of insider trading and fraud, Mazzillo not only has to pay $67.5 million to the SEC, he's also permanently barred from ever again serving as an officer or director of a publicly traded company.
Countrywide was sold in 2008 to Bank of America, which will pay a substantial part of the $45 million that must be returned to investors. The $22.5 million penalty will come directly from Mazzillo's pocket. He could also face criminal charges in California. Katie?
All right, Anthony Mason. Thank you, Anthony. One more note about money tonight. The Social Security Administration made the official announcement today, no raise for retirees in 2011. They collect on average about $1,171 a month in benefits, and they got a cost of living adjustment of 5.8% last year. Since then, there hasn't been enough inflation to trigger another one. But with an election coming up, President Obama and the Democrats are proposing to give Social Security recipients a one-time bonus of $250. And that election is just 18 days away now. In the battle for control of the Senate, we're following a number of critical contests that will decide which party prevails. The Republicans need to capture 10 seats now held by Democrats. And one of their targets is Harry Reid. As majority leader, he's the most powerful man in the Senate. But back home in Nevada, where unemployment is nearly 14.5%, he's in hot water politically. A Mason-Dixon poll this week found him trailing Republican Tea Party favorite Sharon Angle by 2 points. Last night, Ben Tracy reports they faced off in a very testy debate.
Man up, Harry Reid.
Both sides came ready to fight.
I've never voted for tax breaks for people who are here that are illegal. She knows it, and she should stop saying it.
Although at times,
for $2.5 trillion, 25 trillion, 2.5 trillion.
They seem confused.
Okay, a lot of paper here. I have a few notes I made.
They battled bitterly over the role of the government.
My job is to create jobs. What she's talking about is extreme.
Harry Reid, it's not your job to create jobs. It's your job to create policies that create the confidence for the private sector to create those jobs.
Angle also said government should stay out of the health insurance company's business.
The free market will weed out those companies that don't offer as many choices and don't have a cost-effective system.
Insurance companies don't do things out of the goodness of their hearts. They do it out of the profit motive.
It's hypocrisy.
Reid hit Angle hard in a new ad today, saying she lives off her husband's government pension and health care. He's a retired federal employee.
Sharon Angle is fine with wiping out your Social Security as long as her government checks keep coming.
Reid hopes Nevadans find Angle too fringe, even if they don't really like him.
I don't even know if Harry is perfect for us, but I do know I do not want Angle.
The state's largest newspaper endorsed Angle, but at least 4 major Nevadan Republicans are actually supporting Reid, including the former head of the Las Vegas GOP.
If she's elected, we will have little or no say about what goes on because she will be the laughingstock of the Congress.
Jump, Harry Reid! Yet Angle has momentum, raising a whopping $14 million since July, and her supporters say she's no extremist.
I think it's extreme BS. They're taking out of context sound bites, you know, to try and paint her as some whack job.
Now, early voting here in Nevada begins tomorrow, so this race is now all about these candidates getting their supporters to the polls. Harry Reid has a well-oiled get-out-the-vote operation. Sharon Angle has money and enthusiasm on her side. Katie?
Ben Tracy reporting tonight from Las Vegas, Nevada. Ben, thank you. We want to welcome to the broadcast now Democratic strategist Jamal Simmons, and welcome back Dan Bartlett, who is communications director for President George W. Bush. Jamal and Dan are CBS News political analysts. So let me just ask you very simply, how did they do at last night's debate? Jamal, first you.
Well, it's pretty clear that Sharon Angle came out of the blocks, punching. She really pushed Harry Reid into a corner, but I think he punched back. The boxer analogy that everyone talks about with Harry Reid. But I think the issues that he talked about with Sharon Angle are going to be the things that really decide this debate. Things like Social Security and privatizing Social Security, which I think a lot of people in Nevada would have a problem with.
And Dan, what did you think?
Well, Katie, you can imagine that Republicans all across the country were kind of holding their breath last night to make sure that Sharon Angle didn't make a huge gaffe. So the bar was low. So she made it over that bar. So I think most people felt for that reason that she probably succeeded last night. But the fact that the majority leader for the United States Senate is in this type of race where his negatives are so high has a lot of optimism in the Republican camp to think that Sharon Angle can actually close the deal and win this race, Katie.
And Dan, do you think a different kind of Republican might be even further ahead of Harry Reid than Sharon Angle is right now?
Well, there really is an argument within the Republican Party as if a more mainstream Republican would be on the ticket, that with those high negative ratings by Harry Reid, that this would be a walk. The flip side of that, other Republicans say, is that she's bringing national attention, national enthusiasm to this race, as well as money. So net, probably keeps Harry Reid around to the final finish. But at the end of the day, it might be that Tea Party support that makes the difference.
And Jamal, the Democrats have a pretty sophisticated get-out-of-the-vote machine already in place in Nevada from the 2008 presidential election. How critical will that be, and can the GOP compete with that?
Well, Katie, in 2008, people like Stephen Horsford, who was the Senate Majority Leader, won that Senate Majority back off of a strong GOTV effort and a strong campaign out there. And I think this year, all the work that was done in 2007 around the caucuses in 2008 around the campaign is going to pay off. What you see right now with these candidates are two candidates who are basically tied, but the ballot really works in Harry Reid's favor. There are 8 other candidates on that ballot other than Harry Reid, and including a none of the above option. So just in case people decide that they can't vote for either one of them, they can choose to vote for none of them, which is really going to be a help for someone who's in a position like he is.
All right. Well, Jamal Simmons and Dan Bartlett, thank you, gentlemen. Look forward to talking to you in the weeks to come, and of course on election night as well. Thanks a lot.
You too.
Thanks, Katie.
And still ahead here on the CBS Evening News, a brother wrongly convicted to save his life. She had to completely change hers. An incredible story. But up next, superbugs, bacteria that are aggressive and spreading. Why they are so hard to stop. In health news, our second report on a new generation of dangerous infections. E. coli can cause a common stomach bug, but a genetic mutation can turn it into a superbug. Tonight, a look at this potentially deadly version of E. coli and why it's so difficult to treat.
I never thought it would happen to me.
Tom Dukes was the picture of health, an energetic 52-year-old sales executive in Lomita, California, who worked out 4 hours a day until late last year when he was rushed to the hospital in agonizing pain. An hour later, he was on the operating table.
I thought, I might just be saying goodbye. That was my last thought.
Dukes awoke to a shocking reality. Surgeons had to repair a hole in his abdomen caused by a raging E. coli infection, developed after eating contaminated meat. This form of E. coli was much more aggressive because it had several genetic mutations, making it resistant to antibiotics.
Everything was getting, progressively worse quickly.
Dukes' story concerns infectious disease doctors like Brad Spellberg, author of Rising Plague.
These organisms are the experts at resistance.
He says more infections are starting out as bacteria in food or other ordinary places and evolving into deadly drug-resistant superbugs.
It is starting to move out of the hospitals and into the communities.
And what happens to those people?
We're at a point where we may have to start admitting tens of thousands of women with simple urinary tract infections to the hospital.
Because that infection has outsmarted the pills?
Yep. Because the E. coli that causes most urinary tract infections is becoming resistant.
Health officials say that resistance is growing, especially among these 5 deadly bacteria. Virtually all of them carry genes that prevent antibiotics from working, and these genetic mutations are spreading. Another reason for these lethal strains, the overuse of antibiotics. A recent study finds more than 60% of antibiotics prescribed are unnecessary.
It's a crisis that touches every country on the globe, touches people of all socioeconomic classes, all races.
This represents the compounds that we're making.
John Rex is the head of drug development for AstraZeneca, one of only a few pharmaceutical companies still devoting resources for new medicines to cure these lethal bugs.
The trick is to find something that kills the bacteria but doesn't hurt you or me.
Developing a new antibiotic takes at least 10 years and costs as much as $1.7 billion. Drug companies make more money creating medicines people take every day for chronic conditions like high blood pressure, insomnia, or sexual dysfunction. Do you consider this a grave public health crisis?
Yeah, this is a convergence of two public health crises: skyrocketing antibiotic resistance and dying antibiotic development.
I was extremely fatigued. I was mentally exhausted.
It took 4 months and several drugs for Tom Dukes to finally beat his infection. But he says he'll never completely recover.
I think about it every day, because if it hadn't worked, I wouldn't be here.
For more information or to see our first report on superbugs, you can go to cbsnews.com. And still ahead, Grand Theft Auto. It's not just a video game, it's a spectator sport. For 5 months, Mike Arrett has been on a mission to honor America's fallen heroes. The 49-year-old Army veteran set out from the Oregon coast on May 1st, and since then, he's run an average of 29 miles a day, stopping each mile to plant a flag for a service member killed overseas. Today, he reached the coast of Maine, 4,424 flags later. Another long journey reached the finish line today. 14 years ago, construction began in Switzerland on the world's longest tunnel. Workers drilled from two sides straight through the Alps, 35 miles in all. Today, they met in the middle, the drill smashing through the final piece of rock, a huge milestone. But the first train won't roll through for another 7 years. Now let's cut to the chase, a wild one in Brazil that was carried on live TV. Police were after an escaped prisoner who had stolen a car. He's cornered, right? Nope, he threw it in reverse. With a reporter delivering play-by-play like a soccer announcer, police opened fire. It wasn't long before he got wedged in again. This time there was nowhere to go after hitting 9 cars and 4 motorbikes. His great escape was over. And still ahead, her brother's keeper and his savior. Next. In almost every family, brothers and sisters bicker. It's just part of the deal. But there's also a special bond that you don't always see until one sibling gets into trouble and another comes to the rescue. Here's national correspondent Russ Mitchell with our final story of the week.
For those who don't know her, she's simply a woman who runs a Bristol, Rhode Island bar. But for thousands of others, Betty Ann Waters is a hero.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Her story began almost 30 years ago, after the brutal murder of a 48-year-old Massachusetts woman. The main suspect, Kenny Waters, Betty Ann's younger brother.
I told him I didn't kill nobody, man. I don't know what you people are talking about.
But 3 years after the murder, Waters was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison.
I had a 5-day trial and I was sitting in Walpole for the rest of my life.
His sister never believed he did it.
Betty Ann, tell me about Kenny. What kind of guy was he?
Kenny was the life of the party.
She admits he was a troublemaker, but in her heart, she knew he was not a killer. So, this high school dropout enrolled in community college, then on to law school, and became her brother's attorney.
But never a moment when you said to yourself, you know, I'm going to give up. I can't do this anymore.
No, I was never going to give up. No. If I gave up, that would be giving up on him. He wouldn't have made it.
Betty Ann faced setback after setback, and after a long, frustrating search, finally, a breakthrough.
I felt like somebody a mile away could have heard my heartbeat. It was amazing.
With the help of attorney Barry Scheck's Innocence Project, she was able to show through DNA testing that the blood found at the murder scene was not her brother's.
Kenneth Waters.
And after 18 years in prison, Kenny Waters was declared innocent.
I think it's absolutely amazing that she's dedicated her life to this.
We find the defendant guilty, Your Honor.
We'll get you out, Kenny!
Now, the real-life drama is hitting the big screen in the movie Conviction.
You won't ever try to kill yourself ever again.
Tragically, in 2001, 47-year-old Kenny died after a freak fall just 6 months after his release. But his sister says he enjoyed every minute of his freedom.
I just wish he was here to see the movie. I wish he was here, of course, to live his life. And you know, I feel him, though. I feel that he's here.
Betty Ann Waters doesn't practice law anymore, but still fights for others wronged by the criminal justice system. A sister who continues to live by her convictions. Russ Mitchell, CBS News, Bristol, Rhode Island.
What a story. And that is the CBS Evening News. I'm Katie Couric in New York. Thank you for watching this week. I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Good night.